I didn't know that discovering my husband was cheating wouldn't feel like heartbreak. It would feel like humiliation. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing I was the last woman in our entire town to figure it out. My name is Jill Donnelly. I was 38 years old, a construction project manager who spent her days managing deadlines, budgets, and men who believed yelling louder made them smarter. I owned a modest house in Millbrook Heights, paid my mortgage on time, and believed I had built a stable adult life. I had been married to Victor Donnelly for 6 years. At least, I thought I was. Sure, he'd been working late more often. Sure, he'd started wearing cologne that didn't smell like the cheap drugstore brand I bought him every Christmas. And yes, he'd been suddenly obsessed with fitness, expensive clothes, and networking dinners that never seemed to include me. I told myself ambitious men did ambitious things. I was wrong. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday when I heard the front door creak open. I had already been lying awake for 3 hours, staring at the ceiling, my phone beside me with 5 unanswered calls. The real estate market might thrive at midnight, but consulting meetings didn't. Victor slipped into our bedroom like a stranger breaking into his own home. His hair was messy. Not wind messy, hands in it messy. His shirt was wrinkled. His collar smelled wrong. Not my soap. Not my house. Not my life. Late meeting? I asked quietly, my voice cutting through the darkness. He jumped like I'd fired a nail gun beside his head. Jesus, Jill, you scared me. Scared. I sat up and turned on the bedside lamp. The light revealed a faint red lipstick smudge on his wrist. Victor hadn't let me wear red lipstick since our wedding day. The Henderson account ran late, he said quickly, already heading toward the closet. Clients can be picky. I'm exhausted. Can we talk in the morning? I smiled. Sure. Did the meeting have a poll in the conference room? He froze. And in that moment, before you disappeared into the bathroom and let the shower erase the scent of another woman, I understood something that would change my life forever. This wasn't a mistake. This was a performance, and I had been cast as the fool. I used to believe my life made sense, not in a glamorous way, not in the look at me, I have it all kind of story, but in the quiet, structured way I'd always craved. Work hard, save money, build something steady, choose a man who feels like home, keep choosing him, even when life gets tiring. That was the plan. And for a long time, I thought I was living it. I'm 38 now, but I've been managing construction projects since my late 20s. I didn't get here because anyone handed me anything. I got here because I stayed later than everyone else, learned faster than the guys who assumed I couldn't, and swallowed my pride every time I heard sweetheart on a job site like it was my legal name. I'm not the kind of woman who collapses easily. I'm the kind of woman who double-checks concrete schedules and keeps spare batteries in her glove box because things happen and I don't like being unprepared. That's probably why Victor felt safe to me. When I met him, he looked like stability. Not perfect, not flashy, just solid. We met at a community fundraiser in Millbrook Heights, one of those small town events where everyone pretends they're there for charity, but really they're there to be seen. I had just come from a site inspection, still smelling faintly like dust and engine oil, hair pulled back, nails unpainted. Victor was standing near the drink table, laughing too loudly with a group of men in button-down shirts who looked like they'd never lifted anything heavier than a briefcase. And somehow, he noticed me. Not in a creepy way. Not in that you're exotic because you work with men way. More like he was curious. He approached with a plastic cup of lemonade in his hand and said, "You look like you actually did something today." I remember blinking at him, surprised. "I did," I said. "I built a retaining wall that 3 grown men told me would probably be fine without reinforcement." He laughed, like he genuinely found me impressive, and that small thing, that recognition, landed somewhere deep in my chest. We talked for nearly an hour, about work, about the town, about what it felt like to grow up here and still want more. Victor told me he worked in consulting and marketing projects, downtown, corporate clients, meetings that sounded important even when they probably weren't. He had charm, the kind that felt easy, practiced, warm. And he looked at me like I wasn't too much. I didn't realize then that some men don't admire strength. They admire what they can wear like a badge. Victor and I dated fast, partly because small towns don't leave much room for slow love stories. People notice. People ask questions. People start building rumors the moment you're seen at the same diner twice. My friends liked him. My coworkers teased me. Even my neighbors smiled differently when they saw him walking up my driveway, like I'd finally become acceptable. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony, nothing extravagant. I remember standing in my wedding dress, hands shaking, and Victor whispering, "You're mine now." I laughed then, thinking it was romantic. Now I hear it differently. The first few years were fine, comfortable, predictable. We bought the house on Oakwood Drive. Not huge, but ours. I handled renovations myself, fixed the porch steps, repainted the kitchen cabinets, replaced the broken fence panels. Victor liked telling people, "My wife can build anything." It sounded like pride, but there were little things I didn't name at the time. Victor never really liked my job. Not the hours, not the dirt, not the way men respected me. He'd make comments that sounded playful but left bruises. "Do you ever get tired of being the tough one? Don't you want something softer? I mean, it's just weird when my wife makes more than me sometimes." I ignored those. Because marriage isn't perfect, right? Then there was his family. Victor's mother, Evelyn Donnelly, was the type of woman who could insult you while offering you pie. Polite smile, sharp eyes, words that sounded kind until you replayed them later. "Oh, Jill, you're such a hard worker," she'd say. Victor must feel so lucky. Some men don't like women who are intense. His father, Harold, barely spoke to me unless it was to ask something about money or property values. And his sister, Candace, treated me like I was a temporary phase Victor would eventually outgrow. I tried anyway. I brought food to family dinners. I remembered birthdays. I paid attention. I smiled through the subtle digs because I thought love meant effort, even when it wasn't returned. And for a while, I told myself it was working. But somewhere around year 4, Victor started changing. Not overnight. Slowly. Like a temperature shift you don't notice until you're already shivering. He began working late. He stopped answering calls. He became protective of his phone. He started picking fights over stupid things. The way I folded towels, the way I spoke, the way I always had to be right. And I told myself what I always told myself. He's stressed. He's tired. It'll pass. Until it didn't. Until Tuesday night at 2:17 a.m. when he walked into our bedroom smelling like another woman's life, and I realized my marriage hadn't been steady. It had been rotting. Quietly. Right under my nose. After that night, something shifted inside me. Not dramatically, not all at once. It was subtler than that, like a hairline crack in concrete, easy to ignore at first, invisible if you weren't looking closely. But once you knew it was there, you couldn't unsee it. And you knew, eventually, it would spread. I didn't confront Victor the next morning. I didn't demand answers or cry into my coffee like a woman in a bad movie. I did what I've always done when something feels off. I observed. The morning after he came home at 2:17 a.m., Victor was already gone when I woke up. No goodbye, no kiss on the cheek, just a sticky note on the counter in rushed handwriting. Early meeting. Love you. The word love looked like an afterthought. I stood in the kitchen holding my coffee mug, listening to the refrigerator hum, and tried to remember the last time he'd said it out loud without being prompted. I couldn't. At work, I found myself distracted in a way that annoyed me. I missed small details, reread emails twice, caught myself staring at my phone even though it hadn't buzzed. Victor didn't call, didn't text, didn't check in. By the time I got home that evening, my nerves were tight and humming. Victor arrived after 9, cheerful in a way that felt manufactured. "How was your day?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Busy," I said. "Yours?" "Productive," he replied easily. Too easily. He kissed my cheek, brief, polite, and went straight to the shower. I noticed he didn't ask a single follow-up question. That became a pattern. Victor started living beside me instead of with me. He spoke at me, not to me. Conversations turned shallow, transactional. He'd tell me about meetings, about big opportunities, about people I'd never met who apparently took up most of his emotional energy now. When I talked about my job, he nodded, distracted, scrolling through his phone like my voice was background noise. And the phone. God, the phone. It was always face down now, always locked, always within reach. He took it to the bathroom, checked it first thing in the morning and last thing at night. If a notification lit up the screen, he'd tilt it away from me without thinking. Once, while he was cooking dinner, I reached for it absent-mindedly, not even consciously suspicious. He snapped. "Don't," he said sharply. I froze, my hand still in the air. "I just wanted to check the time," I replied, confused. He exhaled, rubbed his face. "Sorry, work stuff. Confidential." Confidential. From his wife. That night, lying in bed beside him, I listened to his breathing and realized something else. Victor slept well, too well. No tossing, no restless sighs, no guilt scratching at him from the inside. I'd always assumed people who lied carried it in their bodies. Apparently, some people were just practiced. Then there were the weekends. He started disappearing for networking brunches, for team building retreats, for last-minute client dinners that always seemed to happen in places I wasn't invited to. When I asked why I couldn't come, he'd smile indulgently. "You wouldn't enjoy it, Jill. It's all shop talk." Funny. I'd built entire careers listening to shop talk. His family noticed the distance before I admitted it to myself. Evelyn started calling more often, not to check on me, but to check on him. "Victor sounds tired," she said once. "You should try to be more supportive. Men under pressure need peace at home." Peace. As if I were the storm. Candace stopped inviting me to things altogether. Family dinners became last minute. Holidays were complicated. Victor went alone more often than not, claiming it was easier. Easier for who? And then there was Tara Bell. Victor mentioned her casually at first. A colleague, a connection, someone helping him expand his network. I'd never met her, but her name came up often enough that it lodged itself in my awareness. "She's sharp," Victor said once. "Ambitious. Knows what she wants." The way he said it made something cold slide down my spine. I didn't accuse, I didn't interrogate, but I started noticing absences, missing receipts, charges on our shared card I didn't recognize, cash withdrawals that didn't match anything in our budget. And every time I asked, Victor had an answer. A smooth one, a rehearsed one. "You worry too much. You're overthinking. Don't turn this into something it isn't." I'd spent years being told my instincts were my greatest strength. Now the man who slept beside me every night was telling me they were a flaw. And deep down, beneath the logic, beneath the rationalizations, beneath the hope, I felt the truth pressing in. Something was already breaking. I just hadn't seen the pieces fall yet. The moment everything finally cracked didn't arrive with screaming or shattered glass. It arrived quietly. On a Wednesday morning, with coffee in my hand and the back door half open. I was pouring a second cup when I heard the knock. Light, hesitant, like someone unsure they were welcome. When I opened the door, Mrs. Edwards stood there with her usual cardigan, sensible shoes, and the careful smile of a woman who knew things she didn't quite want to say out loud. She was 73, widowed, and functioned as the unofficial archive of Oakwood Drive. People called her nosy. I called her accurate. "Morning, Jill," she said. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Morning," I replied. "Everything okay?" She glanced past me into the kitchen, then leaned in slightly, lowering her voice even though we were alone. "I wasn't sure whether to mention this," she began, "but I figured if it were me, I'd want to know." My grip tightened on the mug. "No, I saw Victor get dropped off last night," she said gently. Around 2:15. The coffee went cold in my hand. Dropped off, I repeated. Oh yes, silver Tesla. Very fancy. She tilted her head, searching my face. I assumed his car had trouble or something. The woman didn't get out, but I saw her clearly through the windshield, very well dressed. A dozen explanations tried to form in my mind. None of them landed. Thank you for telling me, I said carefully. Mrs. Edwards patted my arm. You're a good woman, Jill. I hope you know that. After she left, I stood alone in the kitchen for a long time. Then I noticed Victor's briefcase on the chair. He never forgot that. I told myself not to touch it. I told myself trust mattered. I told myself this was a line I couldn't uncross. And then I crossed it. Inside, beneath his laptop and neatly stacked documents, was something that didn't belong to him. A small silver earring. Delicate. Expensive. The kind that comes in a velvet box, not a clearance bin. My stomach twisted. Victor had once joked about how he hated piercings, said they were unprofessional, said he preferred women who looked natural. I knew exactly who the earring belonged to. Tara Bell. I'd seen her wear it at a town fundraiser months earlier. She'd laughed when someone complimented it and said it was real silver, a gift from someone who knows quality. I sank into a chair. Tara hadn't been to our house in weeks. When I'd asked Victor why, he'd shrugged and said she'd been busy. Apparently, busy meant in my marriage. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt something colder settle in. Later that morning, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Check your windshield. I walked outside. There was a manila envelope tucked beneath my wiper blade. Inside were photographs. Not blurry, not accidental, professional. Victor and a woman I recognized, kissing outside Romano's, the most expensive Italian restaurant in town. Victor holding hands with her as they entered the Grand View Hotel. Victor pressed against her near a window, intimate, undeniable. The woman was tall, well-dressed, confident. The kind of confidence that comes from money. And parked beside them in one frame was a silver Tesla, the same one Mrs. Edwards had mentioned. I sat in my car, photos trembling in my hands, and realized something that surprised me. What I felt wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. My marriage hadn't just been betrayed, it had been rehearsed. And whoever had sent me these photos wanted me to see that. I sat in my car for a long time after that. The engine was off, the keys were in my lap. The photographs were spread across the passenger seat like evidence at a crime scene. Victor and Tara Bell, kissing outside Romano's. Victor and Tara entering the Grandview Hotel, her hand tucked possessively into the crook of his arm. Victor in an apartment window, his mouth at her neck, her fingers gripping his jacket like she was afraid he might disappear. A woman. Not a stranger, not a rumor. The woman he'd told me not to worry about. The woman whose earring was sitting on my kitchen table. I waited for the wave everyone talks about. The sobbing, the screaming, the collapse. It didn't come. Instead, my body went strangely still. My hands stopped shaking. My breathing slowed. My mind sharpened, like it does right before a major decision on a job site. When something is about to fail, and you either act or let it crush you. I went back inside and laid the photos out neatly on the table. I studied them like blueprints. Angles, timing, patterns. This hadn't happened once. This had happened repeatedly and carefully. I thought about all the times Victor had looked me in the eye and told me I was paranoid. All the nights I'd eaten dinner alone. All the times I'd defended him to my friends, to his family, to myself. A hollow ache spread through my chest, but it didn't knock me down. It fueled me. I didn't confront him that night. I wanted to. God, I wanted to throw the photos in his face and ask him how long he'd been rehearsing lies in our bed. But instinct stopped me. Emotion clouds facts. Facts win wars. Instead, I waited. Victor came home late, smelling like soap and confidence. He kissed my cheek like nothing had changed. You okay? He asked casually. Just tired, I said. It wasn't a lie. I lay awake that night, listening to him sleep, and realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. I didn't miss him. I missed the version of him I'd invented. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in our entire marriage. I checked our phone records. Victor had been careful. No obvious calls, no suspicious numbers. But the data usage told a different story. Heavy late-night messaging, encrypted apps, gaps that lined up perfectly with his meetings. By noon, I was sitting alone at Murphy's bar, nursing a beer I hadn't planned on ordering. Murphy's is where people go when they don't want advice, just witnesses. Construction workers, cops, men who understand silence. Sean, the bartender, slid me a napkin. "You look like hell, Jill." "Feel worse," I said. "Marriage trouble? Is there any other kind?" He snorted softly. "Want to talk about it?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "If you want to know how long this has really been going on, you should talk to Mila Hatcher." I stared at the message. I knew that name. Mila and I had gone to high school together. While I learned how to manage projects and budgets, Mila learned how to follow people who didn't want to be found. She ran a one-woman private investigation business out of a van that smelled like coffee and cigarettes. I finished my beer and stood up. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I was done guessing. If Victor had turned my marriage into a game of deception, then I was done playing blind. It was time to know everything. Mila Hatcher's office was exactly what I remembered. A converted van parked behind a closed auto shop on the edge of town, windows tinted, engine ticking softly as if it were always ready to move. The smell hit me the moment I stepped inside. Stale coffee, cigarettes, and something metallic like old tools. "Jill Donnelly," Mila said, grinning as she leaned back in what used to be the driver's seat. "Didn't think I'd see you here unless someone was missing. Or lying." "Both," I said, handing her the envelope of photos. She didn't react the way people usually do when they see proof of betrayal. No raised eyebrows, no dramatic sigh, just quiet focus as she spread them out, studying faces, angles, reflections. "Your husband's got expensive taste," she said finally. "This woman screams money, or at least wants to look like she has it." "Can you find out who she is?" I asked. Mila smiled. "Already did." She turned her laptop toward me. "Tara Bell, 34. Marketing executive at Pinnacle Consulting. Lives in Riverside Towers. Drives a silver Tesla. Social media full of wine tastings, rooftop views, and carefully cropped confidence." "How long?" I asked. "That depends on how much you want to know." "Everything." Mila's smile faded. "That'll cost you." "How much?" $500, and I'll throw in the ugly details for free." I didn't hesitate. For the next 3 days, Mila followed Victor and Tara like a shadow. Cameras, audio equipment, patience sharpened by years of watching people destroy their own lives. On Friday afternoon, she called me while I was at a job site. "Meet me at Murphy's," she said. "You're going to want to sit down." An hour later, she slid into the booth across from me and laid out a neat stack of photos and printed logs. 3 times a week, she said, for the past 2 months. Same routine every time. Victor tells you he's working late, meets Tara at her apartment, 2 hours. Then Tara drops him off a block from your house. 2 months. I felt it in my throat, like gravel. "It gets worse," Mila continued. "They're not just screwing around. They're planning." She handed me a small digital recorder. "Got this yesterday, through Tara's apartment window. Technology's beautiful when you know how to use it." I pressed play. Victor's voice filled the space between us. Clear, relaxed, cruel. "Jill doesn't suspect anything. She's too focused on her construction projects to notice what's happening right under her nose." Tara laughed softly. "What about when you leave her?" she asked. "She'll want half of everything." "Let her try," Victor replied. "I've been moving money into accounts she doesn't know about. By the time I file for divorce, there won't be much left to split." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. They talked about my schedule, my habits, my friends. They laughed about how predictable I was, how women like me, women who work with their hands, never see betrayal coming. When the recording ended, Mila watched my face carefully. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly, "but I'm thinking." "There's more," she said, pulling out another photo. It showed a young woman standing on my front porch holding documents. Brown hair, nervous eyes. Recognize her? No. Her name's Rebecca Martinez. She's been trying to find you for 3 months. Why? Mila hesitated. She claims you're her sister. The world tilted. What? Adopted siblings, same birth mother, separated as kids. She watched my reaction closely. Says she has proof, birth certificates, adoption records. I laughed once, sharp, disbelieving. That's insane. Is it? Mila asked quietly. How much do you know about your adoption? The answer hit harder than I expected. Not much. My parents had told me when I was 12. They died when I was 19. The paperwork burned in a house fire 2 years later. I'd never gone looking. He came by your house yesterday, Eddie continued, after Victor left. When you didn't answer, he left his number with Mrs. Edwards. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed. Reuben answered on the second ring. Jill? He said breathlessly. Oh my God, I've been trying to find you forever. Reuben, I said slowly. We need to talk. We agreed to meet at a diner across town. As I hung up, Eddie leaned back. Looks like your husband isn't the only problem in your life. I stared at the table, the recordings, the photos. No, I said quietly. He's just the one who started it. And for the first time since this began, I felt the weight of something bigger than betrayal pressing in. Whatever was happening in my life wasn't random. It was converging, and I was standing right in the middle of it. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and old grease, the kind of place where people come when they don't want to be seen, where vinyl booths hold decades of bad decisions and worse confessions. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a corner seat back against the wall. Habit, control, sightlines. Reuben arrived exactly on time. He looked nothing like me at first glance. Different face, different posture. But when he slid into the booth across from me, I noticed it. The way his fingers tapped nervously against the table, fast and uneven, the same way mine do when I'm bracing for impact. I can't believe you're really here, he said, eyes shining. I was afraid you wouldn't come. I needed answers, I replied. Start talking. He pulled a manila folder from his bag and spread its contents across the table with trembling hands. Birth certificates, adoption records, hospital forms, 2 names, 2 dates, same birth mother. Jennifer Walsh. My chest tightened. We were both born at St. Mary's, Reuben said quickly. Adopted through Catholic Charities. Separated 2 years apart. I hired a private investigator to find my birth family. That's how I found you. I stared at the documents until the letters blurred. I didn't know, I whispered. I know, he said softly. I didn't either. Not when we met years ago. Not when we dated. That word hit me like a slap. Dated. A memory surfaced. A bookstore downtown. A shy smile. Coffee that tasted like hope. A life before Victor. Before everything. My stomach dropped. There's more, he said. Of course there was. His hands went to his abdomen instinctively. My girlfriend is pregnant. The diner suddenly felt too small, too loud, too hot. By who? I asked, though something in my gut already knew. He swallowed. Victor. The world cracked open. What? My voice came out hoarse. He started talking to me months ago, Reuben rushed on. He said he was separated, that you were distant, that the marriage was basically over. Every word felt rehearsed. He said he wanted a fresh start, Reuben continued, that he'd take responsibility. I laughed once, sharp, broken. You slept with my husband, I said. And now you're telling me this because I need help, he said, eyes hardening. I can't raise a child alone, and I won't push her to terminate the pregnancy. That's not who I am. The silence stretched. Then he leaned forward. If you don't help me, he said quietly, I'll tell everyone in Millbrook Heights the truth. The truth, I repeated, that your husband got the woman I love pregnant. My blood ran cold. You think that won't destroy you? He pressed. Your marriage, your career, your reputation, everything. I saw it then. Not fear, not shame. Calculation. How much? I asked. He didn't hesitate. 50,000, and I disappear. You'll never hear from me or the baby again. I stared at him, really looked at him, and recognized the same hunger I'd heard in Victor's recorded voice. The same emptiness disguised as desperation. "You're blackmailing me," I said. "I'm surviving," he snapped. I stood up slowly, placed a 20 on the table, and looked down at him one last time. "You picked the wrong woman," I said. Behind me, he shouted threats, promises, warnings. I didn't turn around. By the time I reached my truck, my hands were shaking, not with fear, but with something darker. My marriage was a lie, my past was compromised, and now my name, my identity, was being held hostage. That night, alone in my house, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and finally let the weight hit me. This was the lowest point. Not because I was weak, but because everyone around me thought I was. And they were about to learn how wrong they were. The adoption documents are altered. Same hospital name, but different agencies. Different birth mother. She copied elements from public records and filled in the gaps. My hands clenched. "Why?" "Because fear sells better when it's personal," Eddie replied, "and she thought you'd pay to make it disappear." I closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, the pressure in my chest eased. Not because things were fixed, but because the fog was gone. That afternoon, I drove to Rebecca's hotel, room 247, budget place off the highway. I knocked once. She opened the door, already smiling, until she saw my face. "We need to talk," I said calmly. She tried to bluff. I didn't let her. I laid the printed medical timeline on the bed, then the investigator's summary, then the comparison charts Eddie had prepared. "You're pregnant," I said, "but not with my husband's child." Her face drained of color. "You're not my sister," I continued. "And you never were." Silence, then panic. She tried to speak. I held up a hand. "If you contact me again," I said, "I will file a report for attempted extortion and falsified records. I already have the evidence. This conversation is your only warning." She nodded, shaking. I walked out without looking back. By the time I reached my truck, my phone buzzed. A text from Victor. "We need to talk tonight." I stared at the screen and smiled for the first time in weeks. Yes, we did, because now, finally, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. And when you take power away from people who thrive on deception, they don't just lose leverage, they unravel. Victor came home that night carrying confidence like armor. He set his keys down carefully. Too carefully. He loosened his tie, poured himself a drink, and leaned against the counter like a man preparing for a speech he'd practiced in the mirror. "We should be honest with each other," he began. I didn't sit. I didn't interrupt. I let him talk. Because lies collapse faster when you give them space. "I know things have been tense," he said. "We've both changed. Maybe we rushed into this marriage. Maybe we stopped listening." He looked at me then, searching for the version of me that used to apologize just to keep the peace. He didn't find her. When he finished, I placed a folder on the table between us. Printed bank statements, account numbers, transfer dates, copies of credit applications bearing my forged signature. Then I played the recording. "By the time I file for divorce, there won't be much left to split." Victor went very still. "That's illegal," I said calmly. "Not just immoral, illegal." His jaw tightened. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting myself," I replied. "Something you should have considered before committing financial fraud." He tried to pivot. Anger, blame, accusations that I was cold, distant, too focused on my career. I didn't argue. I slid one last document toward him, a formal notice drafted by an attorney I'd consulted that afternoon. Separation, asset freeze, mandatory disclosure. "You have 48 hours to return every dollar you moved," I said. "After that, this goes to the DA." For the first time in 6 years, Victor looked afraid. He left that night with a suitcase and excuses that no longer mattered. The fallout didn't stay private. It never does. By Monday morning, Victor's office was buzzing. Word spread fast in Millbrook Heights, faster than he could control. The accounts, the affair, the lies. Tara stopped answering calls, then emails. Then she quietly withdrew from 2 listings and took her name off the brokerage website. Reputation doesn't shatter all at once. It erodes, client by client. Mila disappeared from Victor's life overnight. I heard later that her successful image didn't survive scrutiny either. Missed payments, inflated titles, promises she couldn't afford to keep. The same charm, just pointed at a different target. Victor's family called once. Evelyn cried. Harold was silent. Candace asked what I'd done to provoke him. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. The truth was already doing the work. I stayed in the house. I changed the locks. I rerouted my accounts, rebuilt my boundaries, and let the noise burn itself out. There was no dramatic revenge, no screaming matches, just consequences, arriving on time, exactly where they belonged. And when the dust settled, something unexpected happened. The silence felt peaceful. For the first time in years, I could breathe without bracing for impact. I wasn't vindicated. I was free. I thought freedom would feel loud, victorious, like a dramatic moment where the world finally acknowledges what you survived. It didn't. Freedom felt quiet. It felt like waking up without checking my phone for explanations that would never come. It felt like standing in my kitchen at sunrise, coffee in my hands, and realizing the silence no longer meant abandonment. It meant peace. Victor moved out of Millbrook Heights 2 months later. No farewell tour, no grand apology. Just a forwarded address and paperwork handled through attorneys. The man I married didn't collapse into ruin, and that mattered. I didn't need him destroyed to feel whole again. I needed him gone. Work stabilized me in ways nothing else could. Concrete cures whether your heart is broken or not. Deadlines don't care about betrayal. And in that structure, I rebuilt myself, not into someone harder, but someone clearer. I stopped shrinking my instincts to make other people comfortable. I stopped explaining my worth. I stopped mistaking endurance for love. There's a moment after something like this when people ask if you feel lucky. I don't. Luck implies randomness. This wasn't random. This was earned through restraint, through patience, through choosing truth over impulse when it would have been easier to burn everything down. Here's the lesson no one tells you until it's too late. If someone makes you feel small for asking reasonable questions, they're not protecting peace. They're protecting secrets. If you keep being told you're too much, ask yourself who benefits from you being less. And if you ever find yourself alone in a quiet house, wondering how you became a stranger in your own life, listen. That voice inside you isn't fear, it's awareness. I didn't lose my marriage. I outgrew a lie. And that, in the end, is how you begin again.